Hi there, and welcome to this knowledge tutorial. It's looking at question 1 in paper 2. We've done one already, so if you have a look in the playlist, but we decided to just do another one looking at the Truman Doctrine because, again, it's a possible question that could come up this year. So here we've got explained 2 consequences of the Truman Doctrine. It's worth 8 marks. So really simple. Explain is the command word. It's 8 marks, so you've got 12 minutes. Try to get it done in 10. I talk about 6-minute paragraphs, but you should really aim to get it done in 5. As you can see here, the target is analysis of second order concepts. In this case, it's consequence. That is the focus. You've got knowledge understanding of the key features and characteristics, which is AO1, that's knowledge. If you look, the marks are divided equally, 4 marks apiece. But do note, each consequence is marked separately. So it's 2 times 4 marks to get your total of the 8 marks. So what are the exam board wanting? Well, really straightforward. You've got level 1, 1 to 2 marks, and it's a simple or generalized comment as to the consequence and generalized information. If you're doing that, you're going to be getting 1 to 2 marks. Level 2, which is the top you can get here, well, you're using the features of the period to explain the consequence more effectively, and you are using information, more specific information, to support that explanation. So that's why those two are connected. So the writing frame I would have would be the first sentence is to introduce your point. What consequence are you trying to make? Apply some evidence to back it up with sentence 2, and then sentence 3 is to explain how it's a consequence in relation to the focus of the question. So let's develop this further. Let's look at the Truman Doctrine. Not going to look at it, the actual doctrine itself. We've got a vodcast for that you can have a look at. Just have a look in the playlist. Instead, we'll just have a look at the consequences. What were the consequences of the Truman Doctrine? So first one is really obvious, the motivation behind it. Remember that Greece was struggling against communist fighters in its civil war. Britain was kind of bankrupt. It could no longer afford to maintain a kind of military presence trying to defeat them. Therefore, they then looked towards the Americans for help. So the first consequence of the Truman Doctrine is that the Greek government were able to defeat the communist threat. Another important consequence was that rivalry between the US and the USSR increased, and we know that because within a year you get the first crisis in 1948 with the Berlin blockade and the subsequent Berlin airlift. The third point is that the USA became wedded to the policy of containment through the Marshall Plan, and that's when the Americans spent $13 billion of aid on Western European nations, rebuilding them to avoid them going communist. And the final consequence really you could talk about is Cominform, and that's the Communist Information Bureau, where Stalin sets it up in 1947, and the focus there was for the Communist Party in Soviet Union to basically strengthen its links with the communist parties in Eastern Europe and also in Western Europe, and it was to maintain that grip and control. So with regards to that, let's have a look at an example answer. This is just one paragraph. So one important consequence of the Truman Doctrine was Stalin's creation of Cominform. This was created in 1947 and was known as the Communist Information Bureau. It made links between the communist parties in Eastern Europe and across in Western Europe. This was important because it showed how the Soviet Union was tightening its grip on Eastern European communist nations as a result of the Truman Doctrine. Well, if we break that down, we can see we've got knowledge applied to support a consequence, i.e. Cominform. We've got the detail there. And the AO2 shows an explanation as to its consequence. It tightened the grip of Stalin on Eastern Europe. So this would get 4 marks. I've hit the knowledge, it's detailed, I've hit the explanation, it's a consequence going back to it, it would get 4 marks. Really simple. I'd then look at another important consequence and I could say, well, another important consequence was that the Greeks were able to defeat the communists. I'd then explain how that this was a motivation for the Truman Doctrine, that the Greeks were and the British were unable to commit enough aid and in effect money to defeat communism through the Civil War. And they said this was important because it then kind of kick-started the policy of containment that Truman was aiming to stop other countries following suit, and therefore led to the Marshall Plan. I could go into that if I wanted to. So any queries or questions, please feel free to comment. Hope this has been useful, and thank you for listening.